Hi, my name is Andy Deering,
And I'm Lisa Radke.
and we're here to talk to you today about the referendum on repeal of property tax in the city of Craig that will be on the ballot on the October 2nd city election here in Craig this fall. We've been asked by some people to give some reasons why we think repeal of property tax is a good idea, and also to give sort of a summary of some of the options that we've thought of anyway, as to how to accommodate loss of revenue for the city should the repeal become law or become enacted. And so we thought it'd be better to do it in two videos. This first video will just be based on the reasons really for doing it, and the second video will be the ways and means of coming up with alternative ways of financing the city. So to start out with, let me just read the referendum here so we have an idea. This isn't all the language in the referendum, but this is the important part. Subject to the approval of the qualified voters of the city of Craig, this referendum petition proposes repeal of Chapter 4, Title 3, Property Taxation of the City of Craig Municipal Code. If approved by the qualified voters at the next regular municipal election or special election, the repeal of Chapter 4, Title 3, Property Taxation of the Craig Municipal Code shall take effect on July 1st, 2025. Now the date on this is important. July 1st, 2025 is actually 6 fiscal years down the road. So the idea behind this referendum is that we currently have a 6 mil property tax in Craig, and we would like to repeal that 6 mills over a 6-year period. So just remember, 6 mills in 6 years. This isn't something that if the voters choose to adopt it, it isn't something that'll happen overnight. It'll be a slow process. And with that, we're actually hoping that the city adopts a slow process. We originally tried to stipulate in the referendum that each year it would be reduced by 1 mil for 6 years, but that ran into some complications, and we had to reword it so that essentially it just came into effect 6 years down the road. So it's essentially the same thing, but 6 mils in 6 years is the thing to remember. So why do this? What are the reasons for repealing property tax in Craig? You know, the main reason for doing this in my mind, and I think in a lot of people's minds, is the idea of property ownership. And that's really what got us started on this. If you get to thinking about property ownership in an area where there is property tax, you really can't own your property. You essentially have to pay rent to the city corporation. As an example, Craig charges 6 mil property tax, and if you do not pay your 6 mil property tax, the city has the right to take your land away, essentially. And so the way we look at it is it's not really land ownership at that point, it's rent. It's not a lot different than it is if, say, I rent a place and I fail to pay my rent. The landlord actually owns the place and he can kick me out. And essentially the way it is with property tax in Craig is that the city corporation, the City of Craig Corporation, really owns the land. And even though you hold title to that land, you are essentially just a tenant paying rent. And the rent varies according to the amount that your property is valued.
You can explain a little bit about the 6 mil.
Okay, 6 mil might need a little explanation. 6 mil essentially means 6/10 of 1% of the value of the property per year. And to explain it the easiest is, let's say you have a $200,000 property in Craig. That's sort of an average-ish, maybe above average property valuation. I'm not sure. But if you have a $200,000 property value, you'll be assessed a $1,200 property tax annually. That's what 6 mills equates to. And so we just think that we really think that you should own your property. You should have complete control of your property, so that should anything happen, you get sick, your income is low, for any reason whatsoever, you still own your property. If you're unable to pay that tax, we don't think there should be a tax that you have to pay in order to maintain property ownership. And we think that's really a fundamental right of existence in the United States. It should be a fundamental right that's right up there with free speech. Property ownership is really huge. And so that's the real reason we're doing this. But there's a lot of other reasons, good reasons for doing this, and we'll go through a few of those right now. One of the things that comes up often when we talk about property tax repeal is people tell us that, well, you can't repeal property tax because we can't pay for the schools. We have to have property tax in order to pay for the schools. It's the law. Well, that's not actually true. The state statute stipulates that as a first-class city, first-class cities do need to pay for their schools, a portion of their schools' cost, and that portion amounts to the equivalent of 2.65 mills of the assessed property value in the city. But it doesn't in any way state that you have to have property tax in order to pay for that. You can pay for it in any way you want. It just is a way of coming up with a number. And so schools in Craig can be funded the same amount they've always been funded without property tax. And I should note that a lot of people say funds are fungible. That's kind of a funny thing to say, but what it really means is that I liken it to if you have a checking account in your home and you have multiple jobs. Maybe you have 2 people bringing in money from 2 different jobs, or 3 or 4 different jobs. Well, if you lose one of those jobs, let's say the job, the night cleaning the bank at night brought in some money, and that money paid for groceries. Well, if you lose that money that came in from the bank cleaning job, it doesn't necessarily mean you can't pay groceries. It just means that the money for the groceries will have to come out of some other source in your checking account. And that's essentially how it works with the city. The funding for the school can come out of any funding source from the city. And again, we'll get into funding sources and the costs in a later YouTube. But for now, just it's important to know that you do not have to have property tax in order to fund a school. It is not the law, and it is not the only way to do it. So moving along here, another really important reason for repealing property tax is that for those of you who've traveled around the United States in different places, you've probably heard a lot of people complain about families having to be relocating, having to relocate due to inability to pay property tax. Typically what happens is that outside money comes in. Say big money coming in from wherever comes into the area and elevates real estate prices. Real estate prices start to skyrocket. And this happens not only in the lower 48, but it happens all over. Take a look at Sitka sometime. And when these real estate prices rise, the valuation rises, the assessment rises, and your property tax rises. Now, if you're in a fixed income situation or on a low budget, or maybe have a real small business that's family business or whatever, you may not be able to afford that. And if you can't afford that, you're essentially either going to lose your land or you're going to have to move. And we don't think that's right at all. Without property tax, there's no threat of that whatsoever. You can live on your land forever. Your family can live on that land forever. It doesn't matter whether there's McMansions coming up all around you, huge money comes in, and you have billionaires living all around you. You can still live in a modest home, and you won't be priced out of the area that you want to live in. And I think that's a big consideration. Another one is just a really simple one. You know, if you just keep a lot more of your hard-earned money. It depends upon how much your property is valued at, but repeal of property tax would put money in the pocket of every single person who owns property in Craig. And we believe, and I think most people believe, that the best person to spend their money, the people who know how to spend their money the wisest, are the people whose money it is. And so we think that's a good reason not to have property tax. It's just more money in the hands of the individual. And along with that comes a trickle-down effect. There's Craig brings in about $650,000 a year in property tax, and that $650,000 a year, it stays in the hands of the people, and to an extent it trickles down into local businesses. It stays in the local economy and circulates, and that's a good thing. Plus it stays in private enterprise, which we think is a good thing. Another reason to do it is to reduce administrative costs. I mean, there's no question at all that the city administration requires a fair amount of work, and a good portion of the budget is required just to enable property tax to take place. There's things like property assessors that are very expensive. We hire outside property assessment firms to come in, and they charge a lot of money, and that sort of thing is not required. So just the fact of eliminating property tax actually eliminates quite a bit of cost on its own. So we save a bunch of administrative costs. This next one is a big one, I think, and it essentially puts everybody on Prince of Wales Island on more or less an equal tax footing. Right now, the city of Craig is the only city, it's the only place on Prince of Wales Island that charges property tax. So in other words, people in Craig are the only ones on Prince of Wales that don't own their own property. Everyone else owns their property except the people in the city of Craig, who, in my opinion, they rent that property from the corporation. And what this does is actually creates a little animosity. I mean, people who live in Craig and people who live in the Port St. Nicholas area, for instance, we know that there's tensions between those two groups of people. And a lot of the tension, I would say most of the tension, if not, well, definitely most of the tension, I guess, revolves around people of Craig saying, hey, we pay property tax, and those people out there in the Port St. Nicholas area don't pay property tax, and we don't think that's right. Well, this actually, if you think about it, solves that problem. It puts everybody on equal tax footing. The people in Port St. Nicholas who come in and shop in Craig, they're going to pay the same sales tax as the people in Craig do. And I might add that sales tax is by far and away the largest income producer, revenue producer for the city of Craig. So we think that elimination of property tax would eliminate a lot of tension between different groups of people on the island, and I think that would be a good thing. We want harmony and good feelings as opposed to animosity and angst. So let's see. Encouraging property improvements. Well, anybody who owns property where property tax exists knows that you're going to be a little bit reluctant to improve your property, because when you do so, you incur cost. You actually get penalized in a sense for improving your property. Let's say you add a addition to your property, or you put a new roof on, or you improve the property in some way. Well, that improvement is seen as a added value, and that added value equates to added tax that you have to pay each year. And how right is that, right? So why is that a good thing? Why could that possibly be a good thing? You essentially discourage people from improving their lot in life, and I think that's a terrible thing. Without property tax, any improvement you make to your land and property is nothing but pure benefit to you. You improve your existence, and there's no cost associated with it. So that's actually a pretty big one. This next one is also a big one. There's a lot of reasons for getting rid of property tax. I'm hoping at the end of this you'll all agree, but offsetting future state taxes. In the state of Alaska, as everybody knows, the budget, there's somewhat of a budget crisis, and the state legislature is looking at all different ways to tax people in Alaska. So there's a possibility of upcoming state sales tax, state income tax, and possibly loss or reduction of the permanent fund. All these things are going to make it harder for people in Alaska to make ends meet. And so what can local governments do to help facilitate their people to thrive through that? Well, one of the things they can do is make the tax burden locally a lot less. And removing property tax would do just that. It would help alleviate the burden of future state taxes, which, regardless of whether you agree with them or not, they're probably coming. So this would help people out a lot. It's a good reason to repeal tax. This last one is all about the City of Craig Corporation itself, and whether or not they've been responsible with taxpayer money in the past. Now, I've been attending council meetings, off and on as much as I possibly can for I don't know, 5 or 6 or 7 years now. And what I've seen is that the City of Craig spends a lot of money. They spend a lot of money that's not theirs. They spend a lot of your money and my money. And, we could all agree that that's an okay thing if what they're spending yours and my money on are good things, are reasonable expenditures, and are not irresponsible expenditures. But the fact is that isn't always the case by any means. A really good example is council health benefits, council health insurance benefits. Now, just last year, we finally were able to get rid of the council health insurance benefits that had been in place for, nobody knows really for sure, but somewhere 20 years, more or less. They've been in place for a long time, and those health benefits were very expensive. We don't have a total number on it, but it could be somewhere around $1 million. And that's $1 million of yours and my money that should have never been spent. It's
The $1 million is cumulative.
yeah, the $1 million, as Lisa just said, is cumulative. It's not like $1 million a year, but over that 20 or 20 plus years, it's accumulated to a huge amount of money. Just the last year itself was way over $100,000 spent for the council members' insurance, and the city ordinance really didn't really allow for that. It didn't stipulate that they should receive health insurance, and so that was done away with. But we think that was really irresponsible spending, and I don't think most people would agree. A lot of the council members agree that it was inappropriate spending. It was not right. So I think that's something we have to take into consideration. Sometimes if a city corporation is too flush with money, there's problems with that, because oftentimes they will spend that money. If they have too much, they will spend it. And oftentimes they will, they'll claim that there's justification in spending it. Maybe they think it's justified, but I think that a reduction in elimination in property tax, a slow reduction and ultimate elimination of property tax, would actually be good for the city, in that the city corporation will have to tighten its belt and live within its means, just like the rest of us do. The rest of us have financial difficulties. Oftentimes, the people who live around Craig are kind of limping along, while the city corporation is thriving. The city corporation has over $10 million in an endowment fund put away in the bank, basically invested, and over $3 million put away for the school. And these are good things. It's good to have money put away. However, the city of Craig is one of the wealthiest cities in Southeast Alaska. So I think that's another consideration. It's not like we're Repeal of property tax doesn't exactly put City of Craig in the poorhouse by any means. And I'll ask Lisa if she has anything else to offer for this, if anything I've forgotten. Otherwise, I'd like to do another YouTube on the expenditure side of things. How do we accommodate this loss of revenue? But what I really hope everyone got from this talk here is that I hope we can all agree that if we can figure out a way for the city government to operate without property tax, that it would be nothing but a good deal. It would be good for the people who live here in Craig. I mean, for all the reasons that I've just given, and then I'm sure you can think of more, it would be a really good thing. So the question comes down to, is it possible? Can we do it? And that's what I'd like to talk about on the next YouTube. So thanks for listening, and stay tuned for the next one.